for this interview, by the way. Well, I am just so delighted to welcome who I think of as the grande dame of Seattle dance to our studio. Hello, Miss Pat Graney.
Hello, very great to be here.
Wonderful to have you here. Now, let's go back in time a little bit. You are from or grew up in Florida?
I did.
Okay. Went to Evergreen. Was it college then?
It was.
It was a college.
Yeah.
And then you settled permanently in Seattle in '79.
I did.
Right? So you really had a huge role in the Seattle dance scene and what was going on then, and I think really helped kind of lay the foundation of what it's become. So how would you describe what it was when you started and how it's evolved?
Wow. When I came up here, I was just out of college, University of Arizona, and I came to live with a friend of mine, Elaine Marquez. And at that time, there was a really big contact improvisation movement. And what was interesting about that time, I think, because of our sort of, well, it's hard to even imagine that now without the internet days, but because of our geological separation, Seattle developed its own sort of sensibility of performance, which ended up being quite unique with Run Remain and some other groups that toured Dana Hansen. They were just really, really unique Seattle performance kind of signatures. But at that time I came up, I got a job at this Greek restaurant in the U District, that shall remain unnamed, and
were you a good waitress?
I was so bad.
Okay.
I still have nightmares about it. I was like, you know, in my nightmares, I'm sitting there and I'm eating my hamburger. Plus, we weren't allowed to eat the Greek food.
Your hamburger.
We could only eat hamburgers, which I thought was fantastic.
Sure.
Right? I never get to eat the Greek food. So I would be sitting there and I would look up and there would be 100 people in the restaurant, whereas before there was no one there.
That's like a dream, a bad
nightmare.
It
is a nightmare, and I had it. I still have it.
Well, luckily it's not really true.
No.
So, okay, so you're working in a Greek restaurant.
Yeah, and I came up here also because I knew Bill Evans Dance Company was in residence here at Dance Center Seattle, and there was a strong education training program. So I had come through that at University of Arizona, where I studied with John Wilson. He's a brilliant Renaissance teacher. And Elaine Marquez was also a student. She'd come up here. I'd been up here before through Evergreen. And On the Boards was just starting. And so, and I knew at that time Peggy Hackney, Pam Schick, Bob McGinley, Janice Mead-Muriel, those guys started the scene. And then Peggy was still dancing with Bill Evans at that time. So there was the Bill Evans School, of which I was never going to be part because I was kind of like the blob in the back row. And I remember, it was great. I remember talking to Wade Madsen thinking, Wade, I have such a great picture of your hair, which was very large, and your parachute pants. And I was always kind of in the back, just kind of tumbling around right high. I'm not a very good dancer. So anyway, I started working it On the Boards. I knew that they had just opened it. It had been open about a year, and they had this program called Choreography, etc. And Pam Schick, who was one of the founders, was briefly a faculty member at Evergreen when I studied there. And I knew that she was also sort of a Renaissance learner, and they were just starting the Laban program then, the LIMS program that Peggy and she and Janice were really involved in. And I thought, wow, there's actually artists creating a space here. This is really cool.
Right.
So I ended up inviting, this is so sad. Okay, so the very first thing I did is I invited people to be in this piece, and nobody would do it.
They said no.
No, because they
Why?
said,
Because you weren't a name?
I was not a name. And I said, and what class do you take? And I said, well, I take such technique. Well, we don't recognize you. I go, well, I'm kind of the person in the back.
Kind of floating around the back
yeah,
there.
I'm in the back.
Yeah.
So they go, we're too busy. We have to do our hair and nails. So I got actually, I think it was Krista Harris and Eric Brown, who have gone on to very, very kind of different careers. They were wonderful performers, and we did a piece. And I started then doing kind of a study for Gertrude Stein, and then in about a year, all of a sudden, this was sort of the hot property. But I have to tell you, I was so unaware of what performance was at that time. I was just doing something, and all my choreography teachers told me that is not dance and it's not going to be entertaining. And I thought, like, well, I think it's really funny.
I like it. I think it's cool.
Yeah, but it was hard because I was 23 or 24, and I was really, you know, insecure.
Well, of course.
Insecure.
And you're also finding your voice at that point.
Yeah, and they weren't, I mean, to their credit, they were all great people. They just said, Pat, you need to integrate movement more if you want to do dance. And they were, you know, they were concerned about it. And at that time, too, there was a group of performers, let's see, Mark Anderson, Mark Sula was a photographer. Kevin Harvey was a visual artist. Thurman Statham did some stuff. There was a crossover because the hot glass scene was just starting up too, and I became friends with Beliz's brother, and then she was involved in the hot glass scene. So
everything's kind of coming together.
It was coming together in a way. I mean, I can say that in retrospect, when you're doing that at the time, you're not really aware of what's going on.
No, of course not.
So,
when you're in the middle of it, you never are.
You never are. And I don't know if I was in the middle of anything, but I started this Gertrude Stein thing, and then I thought, oh, well, I'll do a whole evening of Gertrude Stein, which I did when I was probably 24, 25, and I had a guest, Mary Giordano from Commotion, which was Jesse Jaramillo and Gail Heilbronn and some other folks.
So was there a point then where you said, I found my voice, you hit some sort of a groove, you kind of came into your own? Would that have been it?
I
you feel
am
like
so insecure that I've never arrived there.
You don't feel like you've ever found that
I have never
voice.
found that place, unfortunately. But
Which
no,
is completely absurd and ridiculous.
Well,
and not true.
sometimes you're doing these things in college. I thought, oh, I'm a choreographer because I like to make choreography, and I took like one class of choreography in my whole life. But
really?
Yeah, because I just didn't. You're making something, you don't really know what you're making, and you're just doing it. It was something I just didn't. I didn't know there was a method other than what I was doing. But also, the methodology that I was studying, the guy I was studying with, John Wilson, he was an ex-understudy for Boris Karloff in theater. He was a helicopter pilot from Vietnam, and he has a degree in kinesiology. And this guy was brilliant, and he said, get out of the dance program, take physics, take history.
Yes, get informed on all these other things.
And his choreography class was so difficult that I don't even think I could pass it now. You had to do Bach partitas, and I mean, it was just so hard. And I thought, wow, this is forcing me to do something I don't know how to do. So that was my only choreography class. And then I thought, but when I heard, oh, they had choreography, et cetera, well, then that's going to be an outlet. I guess I'm going to be a choreographer. And at the time, we had the CETA program, which was the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act, which a lot of dance companies use to get apprentices and actually pay their workers, which was a fantastic program. And I didn't get hired by any dance companies, so I just came up here and
did your own.
And did my own. Yeah, but I was working full time as a receptionist for a chiropractor, and then I cleaned toilets for a year, and I did many jobs, many jobs.
There's a great quote. This is actually on your website, which is from a former PI journalist, R.M. Campbell. I love this. Pat Graney is a choreographer with a mercurial temperament, which makes her unpredictable and provocative. How does your mercurial temperament drive your creative work?
God, that's such an intelligent question. I don't even think I can answer it. Nobody ever asked me questions like that.
That's the only intelligent one I have, by the way. That's it. Yeah, it's all downhill from here.
Well, I hope the dancers I've worked with feel positively about it, because I think that for me, I'm just going on this thing I've been such a visual person all my life, and I've been involved in Jungian dream work I have years of dream journals, and the image and the visual image is something that I feel like I really know. Although I didn't consider myself really a visual artist, I've always worked primarily visual. Like some choreographers, they put music on and they dance around. Like I've never done that. So it's the visual thing. And when I started,
you start with the visual.
I start with visual always, because that's what I feel like I'm always going on. I have a sensibility of what I would call them like mise en scène, or what the whole feeling should be like. I know always exactly what the costumes are. I know exactly what everything looks like, because I don't know, that's just the way it's evolved. Now in the beginning, I was like, I have to put some dance in. So when I was working with this Gertrude Stein stuff, I love literature, and in the early days here, I worked with Gertrude Stein, Julio Cortázar, Raymond Carver, who I had corresponded with for a while and was going to work with.
That's magical.
Yeah, it was amazing. So I was able to choreograph some of those works, and I was really excited, and I started looking at the structure of noun-verb sentence structure and how that affected sort of choreographic phrasing. But I think for me, if I get interested in a project, I'm going to do that project. I don't like to do things that look like what I just did. I like to do things that are
It bores you.
Yeah, it bores me, and I also feel like, it's kind of a spiritual thing. I feel like I don't want to do shtick. Sometimes you end up doing shtick because you're smart and you can do these certain things, and they're choreographic tools, and they're all good. But to rely on those too heavily, I feel like makes very bad art. And so even though I'll take some chances that other people do not think are good, for me, the pieces that are the most unpopular are the pieces that I've grown the most from, actually.
Do you look at some of those and do you say I failed, or you just say I learned?
I feel like I learned. Of course, at the time when everybody's going, boy, that was really interesting. and then they leave, and then that's the end of the story. It's kind of sad, but you know, I think those pieces really, in retrospect, have been the richest work that I've done.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. I mean, you really push the envelope, in my opinion, and in a very interesting way. There's an intellectual piece to what you do, and of course, obviously, a strong visual. So let's talk a little bit about Keeping the Faith, which you started in 1992. This is a program for incarcerated girls,
women and girls.
What is this program, if you could kind of encapsulate it for us in a nutshell?
Well, it's funny because this year is the first year we weren't able to raise funds to do KTF. We've been doing it for 18 years, and we're starting again at Mission Creek. We did the program for 10 years at Purdy, Washington Correction Center for Women, and then 7 years at Mission Creek, which is a more short-term. It used to be an honor camp, but it's just a more lower security facility. But in 1992, I had this idea, and of course, it was this intellectual idea of like, okay, I'm going to work with a segregated population, nuns or prisoners. You know, and it was just this kind of wacky idea.
Nuns that are prisoners.
Yeah, because I grew up in Catholic school, and I was forced to go to Catholic school with my uniforms, my bad uniforms, for a long time. And I kept thinking, what happens when you segregate a population? You know, anthropologically, the language, the customs, behaviors. But then you take that into a real place. Like our first prison that we went into as a group, we were on tour in Boston, and we went into MCI Framingham. And at that time, we were seeing the effects of this huge amount of new gang legislation, which was putting away people who were at the scene of a crime, whether or not they were actually involved. Wow. So you saw a lot of young African-American women in for 30 years who were 18 years old, and it was
wrong place at the wrong time.
It was so heartbreaking to me. But what was interesting is I think that, and I've taught some classes at UW-Bothell in the sociology department, I feel like there's knowing about something, and then there's knowing that thing inside your heart. And we went in there, and I remember a couple of people were so terrified because...
Of the inmates?
No, of the inmates of the prison. They didn't know, like the dancers in their mind, we're going to be strip searched. What's going to happen? They're going to make us squat. And, you know, they were just completely flipped out. And these were people from a big urban area, so these were New Yorkers. So I was surprised, but I thought, okay, well, we're going to go in there, and it's going to be whatever it is. And so we went in there. We were terrified. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, my God, the women going in there, is that what they feel when they first go to prison? They must have been terrified. Yeah. But, you know, I was always on one side for a long time. But anyway, so we went in there, and we were doing part of a piece called Faith, which was, I just did in a retrospective, but I did in 1991 here. And
so you went in and you would perform it?
We went in and performed a section of it. Yeah. And then we did a section of it with these balls, which you roll around and you do balancing on the balls. And women in the front row started crying. And I thought, as a dancer, sometimes you tend to isolate your body from itself because your body's an instrument. You don't think of this sense of intimacy. Even dancing with another person, you're not really thinking like, oh, I'm having this sexual experience. You're just doing part of the dance.
Right, right.
But when you are in a population where touching is not allowed at all, especially women, and they tend to be more familial oriented, they started. I said, "Well, why are you crying?" Well, that's my daughter. That's my husband. That's my baby. You're touching that. That's like a baby. What does it mean? What does it mean? And I said, "Well, Dan, it means whatever you want it to mean. Yes. It is about." And I realized, well, it is about intimacy. It's about the intimacy a person has with this ball that's rolling all over your body, and to them, it was about their lives. And I thought, wow. And then I remember one of the dancers, KT Niehoff at the time, KT and Michelle I had just hired, and they're great artists as well in Seattle. Such a great people in the Seattle dance scene. But anyway, so KT had done this improvisation where I said, do a history of yourself in 5 movements. And hers was very, really violent. Yes. And I remember, at the time she had her crew cut and she looked like Sinead O'Connor. She's so beautiful.
She's gorgeous.
Yeah, and I think the women were just shocked. Like, what? Okay, you're what could have happened to you? Right. You look perfect. You're fabulous. Yeah. And KT started talking about why they did those gestures, and then the women were like, wow, coming forward. Then they were going out and getting their friends and coming in. By the time we had an hour into this, we had like hundreds of people in the gym, and I just was, I was not prepared for the intensity of that experience and how I remember one woman asking me, why are you in here? And I thought, oh my God.
Yeah, great question.
I said, well, we're serving a geographical area and you're in it. And so you're women and we're women, and that's why we're here. And I don't think I even really knew what that exactly meant at the time, because our sponsors were saying, like, you can't go into prison, we don't know how to arrange it, da, da, da. So that was the starting of Keeping the Faith, and I thought, if that's,
and then 15 years.
Yeah, now it's been, well, now
18.
it's been 20 years since 1992. So the program has gone into guest artists and writing and visual arts. And
did you ever think it would do that?
No, my God, no.
See, that's what's so cool about ideas like that. You don't know. You just kind of start. You throw it. You step into it, and it will ripple or not. It'll
and
you have
somewhere. You have to let it, and that's scary.
It is very scary. Letting go of that control.
Yeah.
Is there any project that's looming for you right now? You're kind of moving into visual arts, you're saying, told me.
Yeah, there was a project I did here at the very end of 2008 called House of Mind. And House of Mind...
Which was fantastic. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. House of Mind is about the accumulation of objects and memory and the dissolution of memory. My mom is in the last stages of Alzheimer's now. At the time, she actually came to the performance and she was more coherent, but now she has, she can barely, she doesn't recognize me or anything anymore, which has been, that's kind of decline is really, it is brutal. It's brutal. Because my mom was so smart.
So you're taking that House of Mind and you're working with it again?
Well, I'm working with it again because I'm doing the basement now. But the House of Mind was a breakthrough piece for me in many ways. We got a team together. No one had ever done a large-scale installation. We were doing a build-out of a 5,000 square foot space, making rooms. We had video. We had giant fish swimming through the space. We had, like, my mother talking about how it was to actually lose her memory when she started walking down the street and had no idea where she was and, like, what it was actually like for her. And that comes up, and then my dad was an officer. I miss his 1940s hand-type police reports. And Amy Denio did the sound score, which was brilliant, and there's the sound of a typewriter in that room. So you're wandering through someone's mind. And when I started out with the idea of the accumulation of memory, because my work has been about memory for really quite a long time in various kind of facets of memory, but I thought we're going to make this button trail and we're going to just start doing it. And we had all these people, all my neighbors came in, all the women from our incarcerated program on the outside came in. People from Amazon came in, and we made this button wall, this button structure, which was 8 feet high and 20 feet long, and it had about 100,000 buttons on it. And it was about the accumulation of memory and the accumulation of, well, of beauty, of memory, and it became these sort of eddies because water ran over it.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
So now that it's in a museum, so then like 4 years,
museum?
It was in the John Michael Kohler Art Center in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which was.
Fabulous.
We took about a quarter of the museum. We did a 3,000 square foot build out, and Holly Batt came on as architectural designer for that. There's some other really great artists, Amia.
So now though you're going to do the basement?
Well, we're going to do the basement of it, and I'm thinking it's Girl Gods because I've been interested. It's so funny to work with women for such a long time in the prison and to see the incredible devastation. And I'm not saying that men haven't gone through the devastation as well. Of course they have in a different,
All humans go through it in
all
some way.
humans go through it, but we really do allow women to be raped, disfigured, murdered, and basically it's okay. I mean, in the world, it's like okay, because it still happens. And people are still doing it, and some people get off doing it. And so I really have thought about the repression for a long time of sort of the Jungian concept of the feminine in contemporary culture. And Girl Gods, I started out by ordering all these doll heads from Thurlingen, Germany. It's an old doll factory that was bombed. And so some of the doll heads are from 1860, and they're these heads, and they're all disfigured and black. And I started thinking, what would it be like to be in a room of dirt and bury these doll heads in there, and then have the movement start from there?
So that's what you're planning.
That's what I'm working on now.
When can we hope to see this?
Probably 2014.
2014.
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming by and for chatting with us. And you can learn a lot more about Pat's projects, past and current, and of course coming up as well. You put this on your website? Update your website.
I will update.
She will update her
the
website. Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you so much. That's great. Good.
Wow.